Aubrey.
Thanks, Dan. And yeah, I mean, for today, my title is going to be Major Comic Book Nerd. No, really, Major Comic Book Nerd. You can see right on the walls, right? So this is, is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and so much so that before I get into the presentation, I do want to take a second and, let folks know that we do have that's going to be fun, a forthcoming course at AppSecU. Let me make sure I'm actually on there. So, an introduction to securing LLM and NLP APIs. That's right, natural language processing APIs. For those that don't know NLP, that is coming very soon. It would have been out by now, except for just a busy RSA schedule. Didn't quite anticipate that, and if I saw you at RSA, great to see you yet again, sort of in a one-way sort of manner. But anyways, a little more on that later. For now, let's just kind of step into Stark Industries for a second, right, and talk about our agenda. So the agenda today, right, we're going to introduce each other, right? We want to know, I want to get to know you. You got to get to know me before we have a conversation and find out why you should listen to what I have to say. We're going to talk about who is Tony Stark. And of course, we're going to talk about the armor itself. What is that? What's it made of? We also want to make sure that we talk about, right, the holes in the armor. I know that sounds kind of odd, but every suit of armor is going to have a bunch of holes in it. And so how do we kind of, deal with those holes? And if if we got enough time, we are going to get some questions. So before I get into that, I'm going to start with a quick slide that I use to get to know you. And since I don't have a Slido prepared, I'm going to ask that you guys put in the comments, just what do you do? Are you SecOps? Are you a DevOps person? You management, that kind of thing, or something else? Just toss it in the comments, and hopefully I'll see it and maybe make something out of it. Usually it's a show of hands, which is nice, but we're gonna make do with what we have today. So, and in addition to that, we want to know who I am, right? So I'm Aubrey King. As Dan mentioned, I'm the PR lead for the OWASP Top 10 for large language model applications. You may or may not have seen me on LinkedIn just gabbing away with my face, and just talking about when our meetings are, what's happening in the top 10, because that's my role with the top 10, right? To get things out to you guys. And I'm seeing stuff come in. Thank you guys. Product, application security, software engineers, SecOps. I love it. There's a nice broad range here. And I will say that the, OWASP, we're trying to speak definitely to devs, right? With the shift left movement, I think that's something that we really noticed we had to kind of speak to one side a little bit more than we had been in the past as security practitioners. I'm also a podcast host for AppSec Monthly. Dan and Corey have both been on the show, along with a ton of other great guests. It's something that I do with F5, but it's not about F5. It's definitely not. It's really about the security industry as it stands today. What are the hot topics? What are some big hacks? And really just kind of talking about things like what someone's day job might be. If you don't know what a SecOps person does, then join. We're going to have some people that are going to talk about those roles. Before that, I'm also a community evangelist, right? I mentioned that with Dev Central. So if you don't know F5 Dev Central, we've been around for 20 plus years as a user community. That's right, putting developed code out there for free and relying on each other to try and figure out the problems within our community and the technology that we use around F5. I also spent quite a bit of time as a solutions engineer, and before all that, as an internet systems and services architect. So a lot of the stuff that I worked on is very much backbone DNS, and big web services in service providers. So that's where I spent most of my time. Now, that's a little bit about me. I do want to color the rest of the conversation real quick with a quote. This is my buddy Paul Pindell, just letting you know the AI apps are just modern apps. They're certainly the most modern of apps, but they're all built the same way. I mean, I think we should all know that now. We've come to the time when monolithic applications are kind of out of fashion, if you will, and most applications are being built in seconds to minutes with containers and APIs. It's not like this big manual process that we used to have to do, right? Modern apps, everything happens very, very quickly, and that is mostly because of APIs, which is why I'd want to talk about LLMs and NLP applications here at AppySecCon. Okay, now that we've appropriately colored things, we've introduced each other, right? Going to shift right into the agenda with who is Tony Stark. It's not me, even though I'm wearing the Iron Man shirt, right? Tony Stark is not me. He's a genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist, as per his own words. My friend Aaron Brailsford might call him a soft, fleshy thing, however. And it is definitely true that this guy is in need of serious defense, right? I mean, he's saving the world, he's fighting aliens, all that kind of stuff. It's like that the day job is seriously hazardous. So for sure, this guy needs armor, right? And let's suspend our disbelief here and talk about who really is Tony Stark for the purpose of this conversation. This is an actual application that I talked with a developer about on my podcast. It is a federated learning artificial intelligence application, multi-model, multimodal. But this portion of the application is, and this has to do with cooktops, by the way. And amazingly enough, it's an Internet of Things incorporation of federated learning. So what we've got here is these collaborators, which would be, in theory, cooktops in someone's house, right? And they're models. They actually have the model in the cooktop itself. That model is reporting back up to an aggregator that lives in AWS. Now, this aggregator was utilized, it was actually repurposed from another application which used this aggregator previously. It had kind of, I guess, maybe worn out its welcome in the other application or really outlived its usefulness or such, but they wanted to repurpose it, and it served a really good purpose in this new federated learning environment. In addition to that, there's a global model that lives in Azure. Okay, so right here, we've got two different clouds, and we've got a whole bunch of different branch locations and Internet of Things, right? If we're thinking of them as branches, they're houses. The idea here is that these collaborators fuel the aggregator. The aggregator tells the global model, hey, this is all the stuff the aggregators have, or the collaborators have learned. And then the global model is able to chew on all of that. That's not really the technical term, but hey, it's close enough. It's able to actually chew on all that data and then go ahead and rebuild itself and disseminate a new model out to the collaborators to learn from the data that they all learned together. Now, the idea, why wouldn't you just smash it all together and have the collaborators go back up to the global model? Well, it's really pretty simple. There is a sanitization process, right? You don't want to have people's addresses, people's credit card numbers, anything else that might be kind of identifying who they are, where they are, et cetera. In that, you want to just understand the cooktop data and what that has to do with the model as it moves forward in time. Okay, so that is our real Tony Stark. And yes, this is the kind of application that we are watching get built with artificial intelligence. It's not all chatbots. So let's talk the armor itself, right? MK1 and 2, if you watch the movies or if you read the comic books, iron, right? Yeah, it's Iron Man, right? Okay, but when we moved beyond that, we saw titanium and gold titanium composite, and of course in the movies, we ended up seeing things like vibranium and nanotech, which I don't know, I thought was kind of a little ridiculous myself, but you get the idea. This is what the armor was made out of. The benefits, I think, are more important. Right? The benefits that the armor gives Tony Stark are simple. Defend all the core components as well as the extremities. And this is an important one. Ensure connectivity between the extremities and the core, right? I can't count the number of times in the Avengers films and other Marvel films that we saw Tony Stark getting dragged around by his arm or gripped by a leg, and he never lost a limb. That wasn't something that happened, right? The armor was real careful to make sure that his hands stayed connected to the rest of his body. That is part of the armor's job. Let's take a look at our Tony Stark again and just kind of see things, right? So I think you can understand the extremities here are the collaborators. These are like your hands, your feet, right? And those are the edges of your application. The head is probably the global model, and kind of the body itself is maybe the aggregator, okay? That's what we're trying to get at here. So if we look at these benefits again, now that we've recolored that with our true Tony Stark, defending all core components and extremities, ensuring connectivity between the extremities and the core. What's best suited for that? So to me, my opinion, cloud routers, software-defined networks, and Kubernetes-ready infrastructures. Kubernetes really for agility, right? If you're building an application today, you need to have agility. That's something that is a must. You need to be able to pack up the whole shop and ship it to the next data center over or the next point of presence over. You have to have the mobility that modern applications require. Software-defined networking for me is the real crux, right? Most of the time, we're using software-defined networks to just make sure that our routes are nice and closed for our applications. And cloud routers, right? We want to make sure that they are TLS wrapped. All cloud routers out there, TLS wrapped today. And usually a cloud router is going to be ECMP'd to two other points out there on the internet. Why? So that if one entire side dies, not a big deal. I mean, your provider loses a pop, you're going to still have connectivity with your entire application. But all those three things are better known as something else, and that's multi-cloud networking, right? Now, multi-cloud networking, I say, is really the easy button to get those three things, right? Okay, if we take a look at multi-cloud networking, it's really locking things up in TLS. You are getting a software-defined network, right? We're routing by object names, not by IP addresses. That's the point. For complete application segregation. And most of all, those weird subnets that you forgot to turn off 6 years ago when some strange project that's no longer there shut down, those will not have the ability to route into your application. Why? Because in a software-defined network, everything is explicitly defined. In multi-cloud networking, same thing. Now, also, good multi-cloud networks out there are going to offer you either a Kubernetes or Kubernetes-like instance, or they're going to offer you the ability to tie in with your Kubernetes infrastructure substantially. So keep that in mind. Multi-cloud networking, right? That's something that we talk about a lot at the OWASP Top 10 for large language model applications. Speaking of that, here it is. If you haven't seen the top 10, this is the top 10. Now, I'm not going to claim that MCN blocks any of these, right? Multi-cloud networking is not something that blocks anything, but what we're looking to do here with multi-cloud networking is reduce the threat surface, all right? We have a massive threat surface for applications today, not just the open internet when we're talking like my federated application that I showed, but we've also got a whole bunch of, we've got a whole bunch of other, things that will kind of creep up on you, like those odd subnets and such. So we're finding at the LLM apps top 10 that training data poisoning and model theft are not typically happening through the front door today. Right now, where those attacks are getting pulled off is typically from exactly where I mentioned. Some guy walks in dressed as a cleaner, plugs in a laptop, and he's on and accessing your application. You will not have that with multi-cloud networking. You're going to have to go through a front door to get into the software-defined network. Model theft, same thing. We're finding that model theft is occurring frequently when you have a partner, like your Azure is right next door to someone else's Azure, and so you create a tunnel between the two. But that's kind of where the models are tending to get stolen. So multi-cloud networking, again, is going to have to explicitly define any ingress and egress for that. Okay. Let's talk the holes in the armor. Keeping an eye on time, right? Electromagnetic force fields for plate convergence, where they come together, right? You've got to have something stick. They fly off, right? We've seen them fly off. So that thing that sticks them together is this electromagnetic force fields. And in between those plates and things like ear holes and the mouth and eyes and such, vibration-based sealing. This is the really pricey stuff, right? I mean, electromagnetic is not, that's not too rough, I'd imagine, price-wise. The iron itself or any of the metal, like titanium and gold alloys, whatnot, that's not going to compare to the price of things like vibration-based sealing or things like nanite patch spray, which we also saw much more in the comics as well as in the films. The benefits, though, is what we're after, right? The highest technology is the focused points of control, right? You want to make sure that that vibration stuff is all around the ears and mouth, right? You're not going to have any vibration-based sealing in the middle of a metal plate. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And then, of course, defense from more complex attacks and harsher environments. We've seen Iron Man in space. Okay, we've seen Iron Man underwater. What keeps that out? It's that vibration-based sealing. Again, it's the real expensive technology. So you can, you got your armor, but now what holds it all together and keeps it really, really tight? Let's get to an application, right? This is a generic AI application that I'm showing you, because it really clearly shows. This is an OWASP doc that we use to just say, here's your bare bones sort of LLM-based application. Okay, anything in that gray is our app. And then all the blue arrows that go in, that's the holes in the armor. That right there is the holes in the armor. So you've got stuff out to the right hand side, which is sort of other services. You've got your chatbot users right there out on the left, or whomever sending you API calls, right? And then you also have external data and things like that, which may plug in from your data center, may plug in from wherever. But you have to make sure that these holes in the armor are explicitly covered in your design. And let's talk about what that actually means, right? So what do I feel? Comprehensive layered WAF, API discovery, API usage enforcement, and bot defense. These are things that I think are absolute minimums here, okay? Because you're talking about comprehensive layered WAF. Why do I say layered? There needs to be a cloud WAF to cut off the garbage. And then typically the successful customers are having WAF that's a little closer in towards the application as well. You might have a smaller, more pointed WAF that is in your cloud tenant, and you might also have something like a RASP that exists on your SIM. All of them are feeding a SIM wholly, right? You're all using SIMs, I hope. So, in addition to that, API discovery is a must, right? You need to know what is communicating with whom, when, because shadow APIs are really the only real kind of if factor in this, right? There, you don't know when those are going to pop up. So if you've got API discovery running actively, you're going to make sure that you know exactly when your app reaches out to some node that hasn't been fired up in 3 months. Why is that node fired up? It hasn't been on in 3 months. That kind of thing is crucial to your being secure in the holes in the armor. Usage enforcement, of course, that's something that is big. You don't want to have a billion API calls from one endpoint, right, going out to another place. That's something that you want to make sure is locked down. Also, methods can be locked down as well, right? You don't want to have people, let's say you want to lock down gets or puts or something like that, or a push, right? You just want to make sure that all the usage is tied down right at those holes in the armor. And of course, bot defense, right? Because if they're identified in a bot network, you don't want that accessing your API, period.
Oh my goodness, are you back?
Yes, I am. My whole neighborhood went down.
But you're Iron Man, so you have some like backup system or something?
Nanite spray. It fixed everything.
All right. Well, you have 6 minutes, which I'm happy to give to you. But I already promised to everyone that you were going to record this session separately so that we can deliver it all to them in its full glory after the fact. But we've been having a very interesting conversation here on the chat about it. But in the time you got left, Aubrey, please cover what you can.
Well, really, I had actually almost finished up and was going to leave some room for questions. Right. The only thing I had left was to talk about model DOS and insecure output handling, really. And those two, again, it's sort of a just another case of just shrinking that threat surface. That's something that we definitely have to get done.
Yeah.
Are there any...
Folks, yeah, I mean, this is your chance to, how do we know you're not a deep fake?
I am. I actually am. I'm secretly Corey Ball.
Yeah. Interesting. Corey's very talented. Well, listen, I have a couple questions. I know there's probably going to be a bunch more from the group, but from the LLM top 10, right?
Sure.
Number 1 and number 2 seem to be the ones I hear about the most, which is, if I have it right, prompt injection and data tampering.
Yes, right? I think we are going to see a bit of a shift there. For those of you that don't follow our meeting podcast, which happens bi-weekly, by the way, and we do have a YouTube for the LLM apps top 10. So go out there to YouTube and search it. But I think the 2.0 is going to bring us a lot of a shakeup. I think one of the things that I've really been raising a question about has been really the software supply chain. That is terrifying to me, or even hardware supply chains. Supply chain attacks for AI are going to mean horror shows. I mean, really, with some of the things that we're training these models, And depending on what some of these models do, right? If they're coming kind of pre-infected, or if we've got a hacker organization that's taken over an open source library or something like that, and suddenly this chatbot that we've been using for months is all of a sudden infected by this library, seeing those kinds of things is going to be challenging. So I think if I were a betting man, you're going to see that one pop way up the
Hmm.
ranks, and it may even hit number two.
Didn't you guys just issue version 1 of this?
It seems that way, right? I joined probably a year ago. I think we released version 1 in October or November, but we wanted to make sure that it was continuous. And we work with the OWASP AI Exchange, which is another organization that is not limited to 10, but all AI threats, right? So we're in constant communication with them and just making sure that we have an idea of what's big on their radar. And, they kind of can tell us what we really should be focusing on insofar as getting the message out to the community. So it will be a living document, right? It is a project that we manage on GitHub, the LLM apps top 10, and it's managed like anything else. So yeah,
Amazing.
we want to just make sure that the latest is always there for you guys.
Well, we definitely look forward to keeping tabs on that. And hear from Alicia, hearing a lot at conferences about AI becoming its own CISSP domain. Sure, seems like that would make sense.
It could.
All right. Well, dude, sorry we missed you there for a little bit, but could have been worse. We got 80% of you, right?
Yeah.
So that's not bad.
The only
80%.
other thing that I was going to say too, my very last slide was just a reiteration. Look for the course on LLP
Oh,
and NLP APIs, right? It'll be coming
I
AppSecU shortly.
I promised it to everyone by the end of the month. So now you're on the hook.